My apartment maintenance man left an envelope under my door at 3 a.m. with a note. Leave the city now. Don't trust your roommate. The sound of paper sliding under my door woke me at 3:17 a.m. I'd been asleep for maybe 90 minutes, exhausted from a double shift at the hospital where I worked as a radiology technician. My bedroom was dark except for the green glow of my alarm clock, and for a moment, I thought I'd dreamed the sound. Then I saw the manila envelope on the floor, lit by the hallway light bleeding under the door. I sat up slowly, my heart already racing with that primal instinct that something was wrong. Nobody slides envelopes under doors at 3 a.m., unless something is very, very wrong. I got out of bed and picked up the envelope, noting it was sealed and heavy, bulging with contents. A yellow sticky note was attached to the front, and even in the dim light, I recognized Frank Delacroix's handwriting from the maintenance requests I'd submitted over the past year. The note was written in ballpoint pen, the letters pressed hard into the paper like he'd been shaking while he wrote, "Leave the city now. Don't trust your roommate." I stood there holding the envelope, my brain trying to process what I was reading while my body went cold. My roommate Gavin was asleep in the bedroom across the hall, had been for hours. I'd heard him come home around 10 p.m., heard his door close, heard nothing since then. We'd lived together for 4 months, ever since my previous roommate had moved out to live with his girlfriend. Gavin had responded to my Craigslist ad, seemed normal enough during the interview, paid his rent on time, kept to himself, mostly. He worked from home doing something with data analysis for a consulting firm, spent most of his time in his room on his laptop, ordered takeout constantly, and rarely had visitors. We weren't friends exactly, but we weren't enemies either. We coexisted peacefully in our 2-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Towers, a 12-story building in the university district that housed mostly young professionals and graduate students. And now my maintenance man was telling me not to trust him, telling me to leave the city, in a note delivered at 3 a.m. I locked my bedroom door as quietly as I could, then turned on my desk lamp and opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, documents, and a USB drive. I pulled out the photos first, and my hands started shaking. The first photo showed Gavin standing outside our building talking to 2 men in suits. The timestamp in the corner read 11:47 p.m., 2 weeks ago. The next photo showed Gavin inside what looked like a warehouse, same 2 men present, plus 3 others I didn't recognize. Another photo showed Gavin getting into a black Escalade with tinted windows. Another showed him inside an office somewhere, pointing at documents spread across a table. There were 20 photos total, all showing Gavin in various locations around the city, always with the same group of men, always looking intense and focused. In every photo, he was dressed in expensive clothes I'd never seen him wear around the apartment. The Gavin in these photos looked like a completely different person from the awkward, socially anxious data analyst I lived with. I set the photos down and picked up the documents. The first was a printed article from the Denver Post, dated 6 months ago, reporting the disappearance of Catherine Brennan, age 26, last seen leaving her office at Meridian Financial Group downtown. Police were treating it as a possible runaway situation, though her family insisted she would never leave without contacting them. The article included a photo of Catherine, and my chest tightened. I knew Catherine. We'd dated for 8 months, had broken up 3 months before she disappeared, had remained friendly after the split. When she vanished, I'd been questioned by police along with everyone else who knew her, had told them everything I could remember about her state of mind, her habits, her concerns. They'd told me there was no sign of foul play, that many young adults simply left their lives behind for various reasons, that they were doing everything they could to locate her. I'd believed them, because what else could I do? The next document was a police report about another missing person, Jennifer Vasquez, age 29, missing for 14 months. Then another report, Caroline Ross, age 24, missing for 11 months. Then another, Melissa Huang, age 27, missing for 9 months. All 4 women had disappeared within a 15-month period, all in their mid to late 20s, all working professional jobs in downtown Denver, all reported as possible runaways despite family insistence that something was wrong. I stared at the photos of these 4 women, trying to understand what I was looking at, why Frank had included these reports. Then I noticed the sticky note he'd attached to the police reports. All 4 women were dating men who turned out not to exist. Fake identities, fake jobs, fake lives. All 4 women knew something they shouldn't have known. All 4 threatened to go to authorities. None of their bodies have been found. My stomach turned over, and I thought I might vomit. I grabbed the next document, a printed screenshot from what looked like an internal database, showing Gavin's real name, Lucas Reardon, age 34, employed by Castellan Security Solutions, a private investigation and risk management firm based in Chicago. His employee ID number, his supervisor's name, his date of hire 3 years ago. Another document showed Castellan's corporate structure, its ownership buried under layers of shell companies, its client list redacted. But Frank had handwritten in the margin, front company for criminal organization, handles problems for wealthy clients, intimidation, evidence destruction, witness elimination. Those last 2 words made my vision blur. Witness elimination. Catherine had been eliminated. Those other women had been eliminated. And Gavin, whose real name was Lucas Reardon, had been living in my apartment for 4 months, sleeping 15 feet from my bedroom, smiling at me over morning coffee, asking how my day was. I picked up the USB drive with trembling hands, then grabbed my laptop from my desk and plugged it in. The drive contained 3 folders: photos, audio, and documents. I opened photos first and found hundreds of surveillance images, clearly taken by Frank from various locations around our building. Gavin meeting with the same men from the earlier photos. Gavin loading boxes into vehicles in our building's parking garage. Gavin entering and leaving apartments that weren't ours, using what appeared to be a master key. Time-stamped images showing him at 2 a.m., 4 a.m., unusual hours when most residents were asleep. Then I found a subfolder labeled Basement Storage and opened it to find photos that made my blood freeze. Our building's basement storage area, individual locked units where residents kept extra belongings, except several units had been photographed open, and inside were plastic storage containers, heavy-duty bags, cleaning supplies, tools that looked like they were meant for demolition or disposal. I opened the audio folder and found 15 recordings, each labeled with a date and time. I clicked the first one, recorded 3 weeks ago at 1:23 a.m., and heard voices echoing in what sounded like the basement. Gavin's voice, unmistakable. The cleaning crew finished the Brennan site. Everything's been removed, all DNA evidence destroyed. The family hired a private investigator, but he won't find anything. We made sure of it. Another voice, older, authoritative. Good. What about the other loose end? Gavin. He doesn't know anything. I've been monitoring him for 4 months. He's clean. She never told him what she saw. My heart hammered against my ribs because they were talking about Catherine, about me, about how she'd never told me whatever she'd witnessed. I played another recording, this one from 6 weeks ago. The Ross woman's car has been stripped and disposed of. Her apartment's been cleaned. We planted evidence suggesting she was planning to leave the country. Another recording. Huang's laptop contained backups of the files she stole. We've retrieved everything and confirmed no copies exist. I sat back from my laptop, my entire body shaking, my mind trying to process the impossible reality that my roommate was a professional killer working for a criminal organization that made people disappear. That Catherine, my ex-girlfriend who I'd loved and worried about for 6 months, had been murdered. That her body had been hidden somewhere, all evidence destroyed, her disappearance staged to look like she'd run away. That Gavin had moved into my apartment specifically to monitor me, to make sure I didn't know anything dangerous, to be close enough to eliminate me if necessary. I looked at my locked bedroom door, thinking about the man sleeping across the hall, the man who'd killed Catherine and at least 3 other women, the man who'd been living beside me for months, waiting to see if I needed to die too. Frank's note said to leave the city now, but first I needed to understand everything on this drive. I opened the documents folder and found financial records, emails, contracts, organizational charts, everything Frank had somehow collected while working maintenance in this building. I found emails between someone named Arthur Castellan and various clients, discussing asset protection services and problem resolution in language that was clearly coded, but easy enough to understand. A real estate developer worried about an environmental inspector who'd found contamination. A corporate executive concerned about a whistleblower with evidence of fraud. A city council member whose mistress was threatening to go public. All of them paying massive fees to Castellan Security Solutions to make their problems disappear permanently. I found contracts showing that the owner of Lincoln Towers, a shell company called Redbridge Property Holdings, was actually owned by Arthur Castellan. The building wasn't just where Gavin lived. It was a base of operations, with the basement storage used for evidence disposal, with multiple units rented to Castellan employees using false identities. I found the file that explained why Catherine had died. She'd worked as a financial analyst at Meridian Financial Group, had been doing routine auditing work when she'd discovered evidence of massive money laundering. Millions of dollars flowing through seemingly legitimate real estate transactions, but the pattern was unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. She'd confided in a coworker about her suspicions, and that coworker had reported it up the chain to someone who happened to be on Castellan's client list. Catherine had become a problem that needed resolution. According to the documents, a man using the name Trevor Walsh had been assigned to develop a relationship with her, gain her trust, determine exactly what she knew and who she'd told. That man was Gavin. He'd dated her for 6 weeks under a false identity, had convinced her he was a software engineer she'd met at a coffee shop, had gotten close enough to access her laptop and files. The final document in the folder was Frank's own written statement, typed and dated yesterday. My name is Frank Delacroix. I have worked maintenance at Lincoln Towers for 16 years. 2 months ago, I discovered blood traces in the basement storage area's drainage system. I reported this to building management and was told to clean it up and forget I'd seen it. But I couldn't forget. I started investigating on my own, using my master key access to document what I was seeing. I discovered that several residents in this building were not who they claimed to be. I discovered surveillance equipment in the stairwells and parking garage. I discovered documents in a trash bag outside Unit 847 that led me to research Castellan Security Solutions. I spent weeks gathering evidence, taking photos, recording conversations, trying to understand the full scope of what was happening. I now know this building is being used as a hub for contract killings disguised as disappearances. At least 4 women have been murdered and disposed of, their deaths covered up, their cases deliberately mishandled by corrupted law enforcement contacts. I don't know how high this corruption goes, but I know it's extensive. Last night, I overheard Lucas Reardon, the man you know as Gavin Stone, on a phone call discussing you. They've decided you're no longer useful for monitoring. They're planning to eliminate you within the next 48 hours and stage it as a suicide. I can't go to the police because I don't know who's compromised. I can't go to the FBI without more evidence, so I'm giving you everything I've collected. Get it to someone who can help. Get out of Denver. Don't trust anyone connected to this building. I'm leaving the city tonight. If you're reading this, I'm already gone. I read Frank's statement 3 times, trying to control the panic flooding through my system. They were planning to kill me within 48 hours. Gavin was sleeping across the hall right now, probably with weapons I'd never noticed, probably with a plan already formed for how to make my death look self-inflicted. I thought about Catherine, about how they'd staged her disappearance as a runaway, about how her family still believed she might contact them someday, not knowing she was dead. I thought about the other 3 women, Jennifer and Caroline and Melissa, all murdered and hidden, their families trapped in endless waiting and false hope. The rage that filled me was incandescent and clarifying. These people couldn't be allowed to keep operating. Frank's evidence had to reach someone who could stop them. I grabbed my phone and considered who to call. Not 911, because Frank suspected police corruption. Not my parents, because involving them put them at risk. Not friends, because I didn't know who might have connections to Castellan's clients. I needed someone outside the system, someone with power to investigate without alerting the wrong people. I opened my laptop and searched for FBI Field Office Denver, found the main number and a list of department heads. One name stood out, Special Agent Rebecca Lindstrom, Public Corruption Unit. I copied the office number and decided to call as soon as they opened at 8 a.m., which meant I had less than 5 hours to survive in this apartment without Gavin realizing I knew the truth. I packed a backpack as quietly as possible, grabbing essentials, wallet, phone charger, laptop, the USB drive, the envelope with Frank's photos and documents, a change of clothes, toiletries. I dressed in jeans and a sweatshirt, put on running shoes that I could move fast in if necessary. I checked my bank app and saw I had $3,400 in checking, enough to survive for a while if I stayed in cheap motels and paid cash. I couldn't use credit cards because those could be tracked. I needed to disappear until the FBI could act on Frank's evidence. The question was, how to get out of the apartment without waking Gavin, without alerting him that anything was wrong. If he realized I was running, he'd know I had information I shouldn't have. He'd move to eliminate me immediately rather than waiting for whatever staged suicide they'd planned. I sat on my bed watching my door, listening to the building around me. At 4:30 a.m., I heard pipes clanking as someone upstairs used their bathroom. At 4:45, I heard footsteps in the hallway, probably someone leaving early for a morning shift. At 5:12, I heard a door close somewhere on my floor. The building was waking up gradually, normal people starting normal days, none of them knowing they lived in a facility being used for murder and disposal. I thought about knocking on doors, warning them, but I had no way to know who else might be working for Castellan under false identities. Frank's documents had shown at least 3 other units rented to suspicious tenants, all using lease applications with falsified employment and reference information. This entire building might be compromised, a honeycomb of criminals hiding in plain sight among oblivious residents. At 5:45 a.m., I heard Gavin's door open. My heart stopped. It was too early for him to normally be awake. He never got up before 9 or 10, usually slept late and worked odd hours. I pressed my ear against my door and heard his footsteps in the hallway, heard him pause outside my bedroom. Everything in me screamed danger, screamed that he knew somehow, that he'd realized Frank had warned me. I held my breath and waited. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds, I heard his footsteps continue to the bathroom. Water ran. The toilet flushed. His footsteps returned to his bedroom and his door closed. I stayed frozen for another 5 minutes, then checked the time. 5:53 a.m. I had to get out now while he was back in his room, had to take the risk of leaving before he woke up for real and started monitoring my movements. I grabbed my backpack, unlocked my door with excruciating care to keep the latch quiet, and opened it slowly. The hallway was empty, morning light starting to filter through the window at the far end. Gavin's door was closed, no sound from inside. I moved quickly and quietly to the apartment entrance, my shoes silent on the carpet. I looked back once at Gavin's door, thinking about all the times he'd smiled at me, asked about my day, acted like a normal harmless roommate while planning my murder. Then I unlocked our apartment door, slipped into the exterior hallway, and closed it behind me with the softest click I could manage. The building's hallway was fluorescent bright and empty, the elevator at the far end glowing with its floor indicator. I couldn't use the elevator because the sound would alert anyone listening. I found the stairwell door and took the stairs down as fast as I dared, my backpack bouncing against my shoulders, my breathing loud in the concrete shaft. At the ground floor, I paused to listen before opening the door. Nothing. I pushed through into the lobby, which was deserted except for the building manager's office, dark and locked at this hour. The front entrance was ahead, glass doors looking out onto the street where the sun was just starting to rise. I walked toward it trying to look normal, trying not to run, and pushed through into the cold November air outside. I didn't breathe normally until I was 3 blocks away, standing at a bus stop with my backpack, watching the street for any sign I'd been followed. No vehicles were tailing me, no pedestrians were paying me any attention. I'd gotten out. I checked the time, 6:04 a.m. The bus arrived 7 minutes later, and I rode it toward downtown, sitting in the back where I could watch all the other passengers. Nobody looked suspicious, just normal people heading to early shifts or morning classes. I got off near Union Station and found a 24-hour diner that was already busy with the breakfast crowd. I ordered coffee and sat in a corner booth with my laptop, waiting for 8 a.m., when I could call the FBI. At 7:30, my phone rang. Gavin's name appeared on the screen. I stared at it, watching it ring and ring until it went to voicemail. He called back immediately. Again, I didn't answer. A text came through. "Where are you? Your car's still here, but your door was unlocked and some of your stuff is gone. Everything okay?" The casual concern in his message made my skin crawl. He was checking to see if I'd run, trying to determine if his cover was blown. I didn't respond. Another text came 30 seconds later. "Seriously, man, I'm worried. Call me when you get this." I powered off my phone completely and removed the battery, remembering from crime documentaries that phones could be tracked even when powered down if someone had the right resources and access. At exactly 8 a.m., I used the diner's payphone to call the FBI Denver field office. The receptionist transferred me to Special Agent Rebecca Lindstrom's line, and I got her voicemail. I left a message identifying myself, saying I had evidence of multiple homicides and law enforcement corruption, and providing the diner's address for a meeting. I said I'd wait there until noon. Then I sat back down in my booth and ordered breakfast. I didn't eat. Just pushed eggs around my plate while watching the door. 45 minutes later, my waitress told me there was a call for me at the register. I picked up the phone and heard a woman's voice, professional and direct. "This is Special Agent Lindstrom. Are you still at the address you gave?" I confirmed I was. She said, "Stay there. I'm sending 2 agents to escort you to the field office. Don't talk to anyone else, don't go anywhere else. Agents will arrive within 20 minutes. They'll identify themselves properly and show credentials. Do you understand?" I said I understood, and she hung up. 2 agents arrived exactly 18 minutes later, a man and woman in their 30s wearing suits under winter coats. They showed me their FBI credentials and asked me to come with them. I followed them out to an unmarked sedan and got in the back seat, keeping my backpack on my lap. Neither agent asked me questions during the drive, just made professional small talk about traffic and weather, probably trying to keep me calm. The field office was a modern building in a commercial district, all concrete and tinted glass. They brought me inside through a side entrance, avoiding the public lobby, and took an elevator to the 4th floor. We walked through a maze of cubicles and offices until we reached a conference room where Special Agent Lindstrom was waiting. She was in her mid-40s with short dark hair and eyes that assessed me in about 3 seconds. She gestured for me to sit at the table, then dismissed the 2 agents and closed the door. "Tell me everything," she said, sitting down across from me. "Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out." I pulled out Frank's envelope and the USB drive and set them on the table, then started talking. I told her about the 3 a.m. note, about discovering Gavin's real identity, about the surveillance photos and audio recordings, about Catherine Brennan and the other missing women, about Frank's investigation and his warning. I told her that Gavin had planned to kill me within 48 hours, that I'd fled my apartment that morning, that Frank believed there was law enforcement corruption protecting Castellan Security Solutions. Rebecca listened without interrupting, her expression giving nothing away, taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she picked up the USB drive. "I need to review this evidence. You're going to wait here while I do that. Don't leave this room, don't call anyone, don't post anything on social media. If what you're saying is true, you're a witness to a major criminal conspiracy and you're in significant danger." She stood up and walked to the door, then paused. "The women you mentioned, the missing persons cases, those are outside our jurisdiction normally, but if you're alleging a pattern of interstate criminal activity and law enforcement corruption, that brings it into federal territory. I'm going to need time to verify these materials." She left and locked the conference room door from the outside. I sat alone in that room for 3 hours. No phone, no internet, just me and my thoughts, and the growing understanding that my life had fundamentally changed overnight. Even if the FBI believed me, even if they investigated and built a case, I could never go back to my normal existence. I'd been living with a contract killer. My ex-girlfriend had been murdered. I had evidence that could destroy a criminal organization, which meant I was a target they'd spend unlimited resources trying to eliminate. I thought about Catherine, about our 8 months together, how she'd been funny and brilliant and passionate about her work, how we'd broken up over something stupid, a disagreement about moving in together that seemed catastrophically trivial now, how I'd never gotten to tell her I was sorry, never gotten closure, never gotten to say goodbye before she disappeared, how she'd died knowing something terrible, probably terrified, probably alone, killed by someone she'd trusted. The door unlocked at 12:15 p.m. Rebecca came back in with 2 other agents, a man in his 50s who introduced himself as Supervisory Special Agent Thomas Reese, and a younger woman named Agent Simmons. They all sat down with files and laptops, and Thomas spoke first. "We've reviewed your evidence. We've also spent the last 3 hours running background checks and pulling records. What you've given us is extremely credible and extremely serious. We've been investigating Castellan Security Solutions for 2 years as part of a broader organized crime task force, but we've never had witnesses or hard evidence. The company's corporate structure is deliberately obscure, their employees use false identities, and their clients are powerful people with resources to obstruct investigations. What your maintenance man collected is the breakthrough we needed. Rebecca opened her laptop and turned it to show me a photo of Arthur Castellan, the company's owner, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s with silver hair and an expensive suit. Castellan started his career in private military contracting, moved into corporate security, and about 15 years ago started offering what he called comprehensive risk management solutions. That's code for making problems disappear. He employs approximately 50 operatives who work under false identities, embedding themselves into situations where clients have legal, financial, or personal exposure. Those operatives handle everything from intimidation and evidence tampering to surveillance, and, we suspect, homicides disguised as accidents or disappearances. Agent Simmons pulled out a file and showed me surveillance photos. We've identified 12 missing persons cases across 4 states that fit the pattern you described. Young women and men who threatened to expose corporate fraud, government corruption, or criminal activity. All of them were approached by people who developed personal relationships with them under false pretenses. All of them disappeared after either refusing to stay silent or planning to go to authorities. None of their bodies have been found. We believe Castellan's organization has refined a process for abduction, murder, and disposal that leaves minimal forensic evidence. Thomas leaned forward. Catherine Brennan's case is particularly important because we've been investigating the money laundering she discovered. Meridian Financial Group was processing transactions for a real estate syndicate that's actually a front for drug trafficking profits. Your ex-girlfriend found the proof, and someone at Meridian reported her concerns to people who needed her silenced. Lucas Reardon, the man you know as Gavin Stone, was assigned to handle her. He dated her, gained access to her files and laptop, determined what evidence she'd collected, and when he confirmed she was planning to file a formal complaint, she was eliminated. Rebecca showed me more photos from Frank's USB drive. Your maintenance man, Frank Delacroix, is a remarkable investigator. He documented a disposal site that we didn't know about. The basement storage in Lincoln Towers has been used to temporarily hold evidence before final disposal at secondary locations. We've already obtained a search warrant, and we have agents executing it right now. We're also moving on arrest warrants for Lucas Reardon and 6 other Castellan operatives living in the Denver area. Arthur Castellan himself is in Chicago, and we're coordinating with the Chicago field office to arrest him simultaneously. I felt dizzy with the speed at which this was moving. What about Frank? Where is he? Thomas shook his head. We don't know. He didn't leave contact information in his statement. He said he was leaving the city last night. We'll attempt to locate him, but if he's smart, he's gone somewhere remote and destroyed any trail. He put himself at enormous risk collecting this evidence. If Castellan's people discover what he did, they'll hunt him, Rebecca added, which is why you're also at risk. You need protective custody until we've dismantled this organization. We can't let you go back to your apartment, your work, or contact your family directly. Anything you do normally could expose you to surveillance or retaliation. I sat back, processing the reality that I was effectively in hiding now, that my life for the immediate future would be safe houses and FBI protection. How long until you can arrest them all? Thomas answered. The arrests are happening right now. We moved fast once we verified your evidence because we couldn't risk them being tipped off. But arrests are just the beginning. Building a prosecutable case takes time. We'll need forensic evidence from the Lincoln Towers search, financial records, witness testimony, potentially cooperation from some of Castellan's employees in exchange for reduced sentences. The investigation will take months, maybe over a year. You'll need to be available to testify when we go to trial. Agent Simmons handed me a folder. These are the procedures for witness protection. We'll relocate you temporarily to a secure facility outside Denver. You'll have limited contact with family and friends, all monitored for safety. You can't tell anyone where you are or what you're doing. We'll provide you with a stipend for living expenses since you can't work your normal job. We understand this is disruptive, but it's necessary to keep you alive. I opened the folder and skimmed the documents, seeing pages about communication protocols, security procedures, emergency contacts. My normal life was over, at least for now, maybe forever, depending on how this played out. Rebecca's phone rang and she answered, listening for a moment before saying, "Understood. Keep me updated." She ended the call and looked at me. Lucas Reardon wasn't at Lincoln Towers when our team arrived. The building manager said he left around 6:30 this morning, about 30 minutes after you did. He took a suitcase and his laptop. We've issued a federal warrant and alerts to airports, train stations, and border crossings, but he has resources and training. He might have already left the state using false identification. My chest tightened. Gavin had run, which meant he knew or suspected his cover was blown, which meant he might be looking for me right now, trying to eliminate the witness before I could testify. Thomas must have seen the fear on my face because he said, "We have agents watching your parents' house, your workplace, your friends' addresses, anywhere you might logically go. If Reardon tries to find you through them, we'll grab him. And you're safe here. This building is secure. No one can reach you without going through multiple checkpoints." I nodded, but the knowledge that Gavin was out there, free and hunting, made my hands shake. I'd lived with him for 4 months. He knew my habits, my routines, my relationships. He knew how I thought. He'd been studying me the entire time, preparing for the possibility that I might become a problem he needed to solve. They moved me to a witness protection safe house that afternoon, a small apartment in a nondescript building 40 miles outside Denver, in a suburb I'd never visited. 2 agents stayed with me around the clock, switching shifts every 12 hours. I had a bedroom, a bathroom, and access to a living room with a TV, but no internet connection. My phone had been taken by the FBI to prevent tracking or inadvertent contact that could compromise my location. I could make monitored calls from a secure line if necessary, but Agent Simmons warned me to keep those minimal. The isolation was crushing. I'd gone from normal life to complete lockdown in less than 24 hours. I spent the first 3 days in that safe house mostly sleeping, my body crashing from the adrenaline and exhaustion. When I was awake, I watched news coverage on TV. The arrests had made national headlines. FBI dismantles contract killing operation. Private security firm accused of multiple murders. Corporate fixer charged in missing persons cases. Arthur Castellan's photo was everywhere, along with photos of the operatives who'd been arrested. I saw Gavin's real face, Lucas Reardon's mugshot from a previous minor arrest years ago, his cold eyes staring at the camera. The news reported that he was still at large, that federal marshals were pursuing leads. Catherine's family had been notified that her disappearance was now being investigated as a homicide. Her mother gave an interview pleading for information, and watching her grief reopened every wound I'd carried since Catherine vanished. On day 4, Rebecca Lindstrom visited the safe house. She brought files and her laptop, set everything up on the dining table, and walked me through what the investigation had uncovered so far. The search of Lincoln Towers had found DNA evidence in the basement drainage, traces of blood that matched Catherine Brennan and 2 other missing women. They'd found cleaning supplies with luminol reactive residue, tools consistent with body dismantling, and documents linking the building's ownership to Arthur Castellan through 3 layers of shell companies. They'd also found a second disposal site at a storage facility in Aurora, where more evidence had been recovered. 5 of Castellan's operatives had agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences, and their testimony was painting a picture of an organization that had committed at least 30 murders over 15 years, all carefully disguised as accidents, suicides, or disappearances. Rebecca showed me a spreadsheet listing victims, dates, locations, and clients who'd paid for their elimination. I saw Catherine's name, saw that Meridian Financial Group's CFO had paid $200,000 to make her go away. Saw Jennifer Vasquez had been killed because she'd witnessed corporate espionage at her tech company. Saw Caroline Ross had been murdered for threatening to expose a city council member's bribery scheme. Saw Melissa Huang had died for refusing to falsify environmental reports that would have allowed illegal construction. All of them young, talented people who'd tried to do the right thing, who'd been betrayed by institutions that should have protected them, who'd been eliminated by a system where wealthy people could buy murder as easily as any other service. We found something else, Rebecca said, pulling out another document. Lucas Reardon kept detailed operational notes on his assignments. We recovered his files from a cloud backup service he thought was secure. In his notes about monitoring you, he wrote that he'd developed respect for you, said you were genuinely grieving Catherine, that you'd never suspected her death was anything but a disappearance, that you were a non-threat asset who could be monitored indefinitely without action. The decision to eliminate you was made by Arthur Castellan personally last week, after you started asking questions about Catherine's case again. I stared at her. I asked questions? She nodded. According to Reardon's notes, you'd contacted Catherine's former co-worker 2 weeks ago, asking if Catherine had seemed worried or scared before she disappeared. You'd also searched online for information about the money laundering investigation at Meridian Financial Group. Those activities flagged you as potentially dangerous. Castellan reviewed the situation and determined you were becoming too curious, that your proximity to Catherine's case made you a long-term risk. He ordered Reardon to stage your suicide within 48 hours. The casual cold-bloodedness of that decision, the calculation that my life was a liability to be eliminated, made me feel sick. Rebecca closed her laptop. The good news is we have overwhelming evidence. Arthur Castellan's trial will likely start in 8 months. Lucas Reardon's trial, assuming we catch him, will follow. You'll be a witness in both cases. Your testimony about Reardon living with you under false pretenses, about Frank Delacroix's warning, about the evidence you preserved, will be crucial for establishing the conspiracy charges. She paused. I know this is incredibly difficult. You've lost someone you cared about. You've had your sense of security destroyed. You're living in isolation. But what you did, getting that evidence to us, is going to bring justice for Catherine and more than 24 other victims. Their families will finally have answers. I asked the question I'd been afraid to voice. What about Catherine's body? Can you find her? Rebecca's expression turned somber. We're working on that. Reardon's notes reference a disposal site in the mountains, but he didn't include specific coordinates. We've been searching areas based on his movements during the timeline of Catherine's death, using ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs. It's slow work, and the sites were chosen specifically to hide remains permanently. I can't promise we'll find her, but we're trying. The thought of Catherine still out there, hidden somewhere in a shallow grave or worse, made my grief surge fresh and sharp. Over the following weeks, I gave hours of recorded testimony to prosecutors, walked them through every detail of that night with the envelope, every interaction I'd had with Gavin, every memory of Catherine and our relationship. I looked at hundreds of photos, identifying people and locations. I reviewed financial records, confirming dates and transactions. The case being built against Castellan Security Solutions was massive, spanning multiple states, involving dozens of victims and clients, requiring coordination between FBI, U.S. Marshals, state police, and district attorneys. I was one piece of a huge puzzle, but Rebecca kept telling me my piece was important. 2 months after the initial arrests, federal marshals tracked Lucas Reardon to a cabin in northern Montana. He'd been living under a new false identity, working as a hunting guide, staying off-grid. When marshals surrounded the cabin, he surrendered without resistance. The news showed him being walked out in handcuffs, his face blank, giving nothing away. I watched the footage and felt a complicated mix of emotions. Relief that he was caught, rage at everything he'd done, and a strange, hollow sadness that someone could live like that, could kill repeatedly without apparent remorse, could sleep 15 feet from someone he'd planned to murder and act friendly over breakfast. Catherine's body was found 3 weeks later. A cooperating witness from Castellan's organization described the disposal site with enough detail that search teams located it. Her remains were in a remote section of Pike National Forest, buried 4 feet deep, wrapped in plastic that had mostly degraded. The forensic team confirmed identity through dental records. Cause of death was strangulation, just like Reardon's notes had described. Her family was able to finally have a funeral with a body to bury. I attended, standing in the back of the church, watching her mother sob over the casket, watching friends and co-workers say goodbye to someone who'd been gone for over 7 months. After the service, Catherine's mother approached me, took my hands, and thanked me for not giving up, for making sure the truth came out. I didn't feel like I deserved thanks. I'd done what anyone should do, but her gratitude meant something anyway. The trial started 11 months after Frank's warning. Arthur Castellan faced trial first, charged with conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, money laundering, witness tampering, and 15 counts of accessory to murder. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. Financial records showing millions in payments from clients. Testimony from 5 cooperating operatives describing the organization's structure and procedures. Forensic evidence from disposal sites. Communications between Castellan and his operatives discussing specific targets. The defense tried to argue that Castellan ran a legitimate security company and had no knowledge that his employees were committing crimes, but the jury didn't buy it. They convicted him on all charges after 3 days of deliberation. He received 5 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. Lucas Reardon's trial followed 2 months later. I testified for 6 hours over 2 days, describing how he'd infiltrated my life, how he'd monitored me, how Frank's evidence had exposed his true identity and purpose. Prosecutors played audio recordings of Reardon discussing Catherine's murder with clinical detachment. They showed photos of his fake identities, his operational notes, his communications with Castellan. They brought family members of victims to describe the impact of losing their loved ones to a system that had pretended they'd simply walked away. Reardon's defense attorney tried to argue he'd been coerced by Castellan, that he feared for his own life, that he'd been manipulated into participating in crimes he didn't want to commit. The prosecution destroyed that claim by showing that Reardon had voluntarily joined Castellan's organization, had been paid extremely well, and had never attempted to leave or report the criminal activity. The jury found him guilty on 12 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy, evidence tampering, and identity fraud. The judge sentenced him to life without parole, noting that Reardon had shown no remorse for his victims, had treated human lives as problems to be eliminated, and represented a permanent danger to society. When the sentence was read, I watched Reardon's face for any reaction. Nothing. He stood there expressionless as he was led away, and I realized he probably felt nothing at all. Some people were just fundamentally broken in ways that couldn't be fixed. I was released from witness protection after Reardon's trial concluded. The FBI determined that with Castellan and his key operatives imprisoned, I was no longer at elevated risk. But I couldn't go back to Denver, couldn't return to Lincoln Towers or my old job or my previous life. Too many memories, too much trauma, too many places that would always be connected to those months of horror. I moved to Seattle, found work at a different hospital, started rebuilding from nothing. I changed my phone number, stayed off social media, kept my address private. The paranoia that someone else from Castellan's network might come from me eventually faded, but never completely disappeared. Frank Delacroix surfaced 6 months after the trials ended. He'd been living in a remote cabin in northern Idaho, completely off-grid, monitoring news coverage on a battery-powered radio. When he learned that Castellan and Reardon had been convicted, that his evidence had led to justice, he contacted Rebecca Lindstrom through an encrypted message service. She arranged to meet him and brought me along. We met in a diner in Coeur d'Alene, the 3 of us in a corner booth, and Frank looked 20 years older than the last time I'd seen him. The stress of hiding, of knowing he'd put himself at lethal risk, had aged him dramatically. But when he smiled at me, I saw relief in his eyes. "I didn't think I'd live to see them convicted," Frank said quietly. "I thought Castellan would find me before the trial, or that I'd spend the rest of my life running. I never imagined the system would actually work, that justice would happen." Rebecca told him that his evidence had been the foundation of the entire case, That without his investigation and courage, none of the victims' families would have gotten answers. None of the killers would have faced consequences. Frank nodded slowly. I couldn't live with what I'd seen. Couldn't go to bed at night knowing I'd cleaned up blood evidence and said nothing. Catherine Brennan deserved better. They all deserved better. He looked at me. I'm sorry I couldn't warn you sooner. I didn't know they'd decided to eliminate you until I heard that phone conversation the night before. I barely had time to put the envelope together. I told him he'd saved my life, that I'd gotten out with 20 minutes to spare, that if he'd delayed even slightly, I'd probably be dead now. We talked for an hour about what had happened, about the trials, about the victims whose bodies had been found, and the several who still hadn't been located. Frank said he planned to stay in Idaho, live quietly, maybe write about his experience someday when enough time had passed. Rebecca promised the FBI would maintain light protective surveillance on him, just in case any of Castellan's remaining operatives decided to seek revenge. But with the organization dismantled and its leader imprisoned forever, the threat had largely evaporated. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now, and let me know your take in the comments.